Here's what's coming up on the world today. WHO begins special session amid concerns over Omicron variant, says it poses very high global risk. South Africa's president calls for lifting of travel bans. Plus, more countries reimpose travel curbs over new COVID strain as more cases announced around the world. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shobowale. As concerns grow over the Omicron variant, a three-day special session of the World Health Assembly has kicked off to discuss pandemic preparedness and response. The WHO says the heavily mutated variant is likely to spread internationally and poses a very high risk of infection surges that could have severe consequences in some places. The UN agency adds that no Omicron-linked deaths have been reported, though further research is needed to assess its potential to escape protection against immunity induced by vaccines and previous infections.
The emergence of the highly mutated Omicron variant underlines just how perilous and precarious our situation is. South Africa and Botswana should be thanked for detecting, sequencing, and reporting this variant, not penalized. Indeed, Omicron demonstrates just why the world needs a new accord on pandemics. Our current system disincentivizes countries from alerting others to threats that will inevitably land on their shores. We shouldn't need another wake-up call. We should all be wide awake to the threat of this virus. But Omicron's very emergence is another reminder that although many of us might think we're done with COVID-19, it's not done with us. We're living through a cycle of panic and neglect. Hard-won gains could vanish in an instant. Our most immediate task, therefore, is to end this pandemic.
Well, also speaking at the World Health Assembly, Dr. Richard Hatchett, CEO of the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, blamed the emergence of variants on inequity of access to vaccines.
Has fulfilled in a precise way the predictions of the scientists who warned that the elevated transmission of the virus in areas with limited access to vaccine would speed its evolution. Having fully vaccinated less than a quarter of their populations, Botswana and South Africa provided a fertile environment for such evolution. The virus is a ruthless opportunist, and the inequity that has characterized the global response has now come home to roost.
Meanwhile, South Africa's president has condemned travel bans enacted against his country and its neighbors over the new coronavirus variant. President Cyril Ramaphosa says he's deeply disappointed by the action, which he describes as unjustified, and calls for the bans to be urgently lifted. The WHO has warned against countries hastily imposing travel curbs. However, bans have been introduced in recent days, including by the United Kingdom, the EU and the United States.
At the same time, we need to resist unjustified as well as unscientific travel restrictions that only serve to further disadvantage developing economies. We have seen how some countries have started restricting travel to other countries, thus damaging their economies and particularly sectors of their economies that rely on the travel people around the world.
Any suspicious activity to the police.
Meanwhile, bearing the brunt of the travel bans imposed, travellers stranded at Johannesburg's International Airport say they feel helpless as flights from South Africa were cancelled. The variant was first announced on Wednesday last week by a team of scientists in South Africa who said they had detected a variant that could possibly evade the body's immune response and make it more transmissible.
I am very sad, depressed and helpless because the Kenya Airways doesn't understand that we are UK residents because we are going there as a skilled workers. So we don't know how to do. We are just waiting here. We don't know how they will help, but they just told us they can't help us. It does give me a bit of anxiety, but as long as I do the best I can to stay safe, I mean, I can't control the other person next to me, but as long as I do my best, then that's the most I can do, I think.
Well, global concerns have been growing as infections related to the new highly transmissible Omicron COVID-19 variant continue to spread throughout the world, with a number of countries enforcing new control measures and entry bans. New cases of the variant have been reported in countries today, including Scotland and Portugal. Japan has banned foreigners from entering, and Australia has delayed reopening. Here's more from around the world.
6 cases of Omicron have been found in Scotland, taking the total to 9 found in the UK so far. England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland have all restricted travel to Southern Africa, where the variant was first detected last week, in a bid to slow its spread.
So in line with the rest of the UK, we have reinstated the red list of countries, and to date 10 countries from Southern Africa have been added to that red list. Anybody travelling back to Scotland from those 10 countries must enter managed quarantine for 10 days on their arrival. In addition, anyone arriving in Scotland from anywhere outside the common travel area will be asked to take a PCR test on the 2nd day after arrival and self-isolate until they get the result of that test.
And Japan is one of the latest countries to reinstate travel restrictions, banning all foreigners from entering the country from Tuesday. South Korea has also shelved plans to further relax COVID-19 curbs due to the strain on its healthcare system from rising hospitalizations and death rates, as well as the threat posed by the new Omicron variant. Similarly, Australia has paused the reopening of its borders because of the Omicron variant. It comes after the country reported its first few cases of the Omicron coronavirus variant.
The fact that we've had a new variant, that is not a surprise. We've been saying all through the pandemic that new variants will come and we'll deal with them as they turn up. We'll get the best information, we'll work together, we'll make sensible, practical, balanced decisions. And my key message to people is just to remain calm, do what you're doing, follow all the same usual procedures.
Portugal has detected 13 cases of the Omicron variant of the coronavirus, all involving players and staff members of Lisbon Soccer Club, after one player recently returned from South Africa. And finally, Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte has urged citizens to get vaccinated as the country launches a mass inoculation drive amid fears of the Omicron variant.
And now more from South Africa, where officials have been meeting. According to a top South African infectious disease expert, existing COVID-19 vaccines should be highly effective at preventing severe disease and hospitalization from the newly identified variant. Speaking at a news conference, Professor Abdul Karim, who served as the government's chief advisor during the initial response to the pandemic, said it's too early to say whether that Omicron led to more severe clinical symptoms than previous variants. However, I also noted that it does appear more contagious and more likely to infect people with immunity from vaccination or prior infection.
Yes, smiley face, because we know that most of the things we use in our standard treatment protocols should be effective. There's one area that's not clear, and that's on monoclonal antibodies. That remains to be tested. We don't really widely use them in South Africa, so they don't really impact on us. There's new potential treatments coming into play, like Paxlovid. I won't go into that because that's more complicated to share with you, and I can always cover that in later times. But based on what we know, and based on how the other variants of concern have reacted to vaccine immunity, we can expect that we will still see high effectiveness for hospitalization and severe disease, and that protection of the vaccines is likely to remain strong. Now, I don't know this definitively. The studies are being done. But based on what we know, we can expect that this is the likely scenario, that the vaccines should hold well in terms of preventing hospitalization, severe disease, because they depend more on T-cell immunity and less on antibodies. Expect that higher transmissibility is likely. And so we're going to get more cases quickly. We're already seeing early evidence of this. And if that happens, the cases of concern, I'm expecting we'll top over 10,000 cases by the end of the week per day.
We're doing everything possible to make sure that our health facilities are ready. We know that as the infections rise, people will get sick, some will get severe, especially those who have not been vaccinated. But we know that there will also be incidences where even those who are vaccinated may get ill, and the health facilities should be ready.
Now, more updates from the UK now. The government's vaccine advisors say booster jabs will be offered to all over 18s to help stop a potential wave driven by the new variant. The advice has been given to ministers in all parts of the UK. The gap between second dose and booster should also be reduced to 3 months, down from the 6-month gap currently being used. It comes after 2 more cases of the Omicron variant were confirmed in England, taking the total to 11 found in the UK so far. Meanwhile, on the streets of London, many say they are concerned that the discovery of the variant would ruin Christmas plans.
Yeah, they always test the public, see how willing they are to do stuff. It seems like all the stuff that didn't work the first time round, they're going to try again for some reason. I don't quite understand it, but a lot of people are hysterical. There's a lot of collective hysteria, I feel like, at the moment, and I'm not one of the ones buying into it myself, but I feel like I'm in the minority massively. Yeah, there's been a lot of ostracized individuals trying to get on trains and trying to go into shops without a mask on in the next couple of weeks. And I don't know if the shops want people not going into their shops because they don't want to wear a mask, which I think is what's going to happen. They're going to go on Amazon, they're going to go on the internet instead, so yeah.
I've got family in Ireland, and they've planned to fly over for New Year's Eve. I think it's slightly different. There's a common travel area, but I think we would change our plans if anything was happening with the variant. We've all got children and in-laws that we'd be worried about, so yes, slight concern.
I think we've just got to get on with life. Like, the reality is, it's a virus. We've got to learn to live with it. We're vaccinated. We can't continue to shut down people's lives and the economy long term, and we've just got to get on with it.
I think as a precautionary measure, it's probably a good thing, because until we find out more about the variant and what mutations it has, then we can only go by assumptions at the moment, and probably best to go by the worst case.
We're still on the COVID-19 pandemic as global concerns grow as infections related to the new highly transmissible Omicron COVID-19 variant continues to spread throughout the world, with a number of countries enforcing new control measures and entry bans. In the UK, as we mentioned earlier, the government's vaccine advisors say booster jabs will be offered to all over 18s to try and stop a potential wave driven by the new variant. Well, our London correspondent correspondent Juliana Olainka joins us now for more on this. Juliana, you heard there just before the break, with Christmas approaching, people are worried. The government has already announced measures. Speak to us about them, and as this variant spreads and the World Health Organization says it poses a high global risk, what are the possibilities of even more restrictions in the coming days?
Yeah, good evening, Teddy. Well, the possibility of more restrictions are high, which is why, as expressed on Westminster Bridge by those commuters there, lots of people are worried. Nobody really knows what's going on. And unfortunately, for people living in the UK, this is 2020 Christmas all over again. It was just 12 months ago that we were having this same problem with the Kent variant, which was then dubbed the Delta variant. Now we've got the Omicron variant. On Saturday, Prime Minister Boris Johnson had a televised news conference announcing a raft of new restrictions, most of which will come into fruition tomorrow morning from 4 a.m. Already we have this blanket ban from Southern Africa. You cannot come into the country if you're not a British or Irish citizen from those regions. But if you are coming back, you've got to go into this 10-day mandatory quarantine hotel, which we saw in the summer. Also now, even if you are double vaccinated and you're traveling from overseas, you must self-isolate for 2 days, and you can only be released from self-isolation if you have a negative PCR test. Also now, secondary school children will have to wear face masks in communal areas. We're also hearing that from tomorrow, people will have to wear face masks in public places, be it shops, cafes, public transports. I'm already hearing that big shindigs planned this Christmas are starting to be planned. A lot of restaurateurs who were hoping that they'd be able to bank some of their losses that they've received over the past 18 or so months. They were really looking forward to this Christmas season, but a lot of these big corporate organisations are getting really concerned. So yes, there are major concerns here in place, new restrictions, but Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he will not review what he set out on Saturday until 3 weeks' time, which brings us up until about the 20th of December. That's been met with lots of criticism from the First Minister of Wales, Mark Drayford, also the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon. They don't think the Prime Minister has gone far enough. They want to see more restrictions in place. But as we know, Tenny, Prime Minister Boris Johnson is a populist Prime Minister. He will not want to let people down, considering Christmas was cancelled just 5 days before last time.
Yeah, and I mean, now officials are kind of scrambling to do as much as they can. And with vaccination, the government vaccine advisors have met, and they've advised that booster jabs should be offered to all over 18s. Speak to us about that and other outcomes of their meeting.
We've just had an announcement by the Health Secretary, Sajid Javid. He was speaking to lawmakers outlining this new blanket offer for anybody over the age of 18 and under to take this booster jab. So this is the first shot. Over 90% of people in the UK have received 2 doses of vaccines. Now this booster jab is going to be ramped up. I believe about 18 million people have already received a third dose, which is remarkable in itself. But of course, now they want to make sure enough people have been vaccinated. You know, this is causing a little bit of controversy because we know that there are so many, in fact, millions, if not more than 1 billion people around the world haven't received even one vaccine. There were so many promises from G7, G20 nations to the global south that they would be stopping hoarding vaccines and be giving them out. It doesn't seem that Britain is willing to do this. They can see what's happened across mainland Europe and the fact that vaccination, death rates and infection rates are increasing. It's the vaccination programme, the successful vaccination programme that Boris Johnson's Conservative government has rolled out that is really keeping us afloat. At the moment, hospitalisation numbers are down, cases are now starting to decline. So they really want to get these third jabs into people's arms as soon as possible until scientists and health officials will able to determine if Omicron is as deadly as some are saying it is.
All right then, Juliana, thank you so much for the update.
Thanks.
To other stories now, critical talks with Iran to prevent the collapse of a nuclear deal have resumed in Vienna after a 5-month pause. Officials are discussing the possible return of the U.S. to the 2015 accord, which limited Iran's nuclear activities in return for the lifting of sanctions. Iran has violated key commitments since then President Donald Trump pulled out in 2018 and reinstated U.S. sanctions. Joe Biden is willing to lift them if Iran reverses the breaches, but Iran wants the U.S. to make the first move. Western diplomats have warned that time is running out to negotiate a solution because of the significant advances Iran has made in its uranium enrichment program, which is a possible pathway to a nuclear bomb. Iran insists that its nuclear program is entirely peaceful. Meanwhile, Israel has cautioned world powers to beware of what it describes as Iranian nuclear blackmail as diplomats meet.
Iran deserves no rewards, no bargain deals, and no sanctions relief in return for their brutality. I call upon our allies around the world: do not give in to Iran's nuclear blackmail. Today, Iran will be arriving at negotiations in Vienna with a clear goal: to end sanctions in exchange for almost nothing. Iran won't just keep its nuclear program. From today, they'll be getting paid for it. Despite Iran's violations and undermining of the nuclear inspections, Iran will be arriving at the negotiation table in Vienna, and there are those who think they deserve to have their sanctions removed and hundreds of billions of dollars poured right into their rotten regime.
And now Sweden's first female prime minister has been reappointed to the top job after political turmoil forced her to resign within hours of taking the post last week. MPs backed Social Democratic Party leader Magdalena Andersson by a narrow margin in a new vote today. She will attempt to lead a one-party government until an election in September next year. She stood down as prime minister last Wednesday after her coalition collapsed. Just hours earlier, Ms. Andersson had been elected as Sweden's first female prime minister by a single vote in parliament. But the 54-year-old's plan for forming a new coalition government with the Green Party was thrown into disarray when her budget proposal failed to pass. And that's the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Teniola Shubowale.